Alright, please put your phones on silent so we can continue with this lecture. Or start the lecture, actually. So, my voice is a little choppy from the weather. I don't know what it is, but just deal with it. So, we're doing a gradient mash. And the point of this is that we need to redraw this item in Illustrator. This is a bell pepper. It's a red bell pepper. You can go to Google and type in bell pepper into the images. If you go to tools, you can say label for use with modification. Okay, and the reason that we want to do this is, let's say you actually wanted to make money off of this. You can't do that unless you actually have permission to make money off of it. Not that we're making money off it, but you want to be aware of it, especially if you get a job at a company doing this kind of thing. You could specify even further, red bell pepper, whatever. I think that's the one I used. Yep. Yellow bell pepper, whatever. You can use other vegetables too. The idea with this is that we have something that is relatively complex in its overall shape, but the surface is relatively smooth. Okay, so if we went to, like, if you had Photoshop, if you went to like an apple has a lot of smoothness to it, but there's a lot of color variations in there. So this is something you could do, but in order to get the detail that's inside of like all these little dots in Illustrator, it's a lot of work. Okay. Cucumber. Same thing with the cucumber. You could do something like this. Again, there's a lot of detail in it. Okay. The best thing to do is kind of go through the first part, following along with what I'm going to do with mine. And then once you have the concept to it, then you could say, okay, well, if I want to do a cucumber or something else, then I can definitely try that. But do find something more difficult than a cucumber, because this is actually, the mesh itself will be complex, but the shape is too simple for this assignment. Okay. Same thing with like an orange. The shape is completely roundish, so there's not a whole lot of variation to it. So you want to find something that's more complex. That's why the bell pepper is a great tool for this, because there's so many different shapes that we can stack on top of each other to create that blend. So find something like that. You could actually use, I don't know why peppers are just good. Chili pepper. There you go. And then obviously you want to find a good picture of it too. So we wouldn't use something like this. This is a vectored image of a pepper. This is a flat vector image of a pepper. Same thing. These are just two clustered together. You really want to find something that has a good look to it at the start. Okay. So let me go back to mine that I had, or even like this one. All right. So let's say I want to use this picture. I'm going to say View Image. Here's the image. So I'm going to right click. Now I can do two things. One of them is I could save the image as, okay, and save it to my folder, or I can copy the image. If I save the image, it allows me to place it in Illustrator. If I copy it, I can just paste it in Illustrator. Now, I'll get into that in a second, but just to be safe, always save it, and then you can copy it if you need to, okay? All right, so let's get into like what this is going to be doing, or why we would be doing this. So here's the original image that I had. If we look at the size of this in Photoshop, you don't have to look at it in yours. I'm just showing you in mine. This is a 4" by 4.5" image, and the resolution is 72. So if I wanted to put this on something bigger, like a billboard, this image would not go, okay? And basically we'd have to resize it to an enormous amount in order to do that. So if we had a vectorized image, we could, you can see the detail here is just gone, right? As we zoom in, I'll even hide the pixel grid. There we go. You can see how choppy the edges are. Okay, it looks horrible. We couldn't make this very big. So we want to redraw this in vector so that we could then put this on a billboard or put this on something bigger. Okay, that's the concept of this. We're taking this exact artwork and we're recreating this exact-ish artwork with some cleanup stuff inside Illustrator. All right, so you don't need to go into Photoshop for it. I just want to show you that part of it. All right, so whether you copied it or saved it, you're going to go to File, New. It's going to be a 6x6 again. Okay, and remember the size for these, it matters for the assignment, But once we're done, if we accidentally made this the wrong size, we could just grab everything, copy it, paste it into a new one, and resize it, and we wouldn't lose any resolution. Okay, so 6 by 6 inches, CMYK, and create. All right, so if we downloaded our picture, so let me go back to this. So I'm going to save this. I just right-clicked and saved it into my GradientMesh folder, bell pepper. Okay. When I'm in Illustrator, I can go to File and do a place. And then what this is going to do is GradientMesh. There it is. Okay, it brings it in on this like weird icon, weird cursor. I click, and there it is. Now I can hold down Shift and Alt and resize it, and then place it. Okay. So what this does is it actually like links this file into my Illustrator file. So if I go to Window, Links, right here, there's my bell pepper linked in. Okay. Now the cool thing about this is that if we were to change that image, it would automatically change this image for us. So if we decide to use a different bell pepper, name the exact same thing, we could replace it. Or we could right click or go up here and say relink. We can say go to link, edit the original, update the link, whatever. Okay, so there's lots of different things that we can do inside here. Now let's say that we wanted to do it a different way. So if I were to copy the image and I just pasted it, so I did Control V. Okay, there it is. And I shrunk it down again, place it. The file is going to look exactly the same. Okay, so there's no discernible difference here. But what we do get is now over here, it doesn't show us the location of this. Okay, this is an embedded file now. So what that means is I could take this file anywhere and it'll go with me anywhere. Okay, so if I were to just send you my Illustrator file, you'd be able to open this up and see the pepper. But if I had it placed like with this, then I wouldn't have that file. I'd have to send you the file plus my Illustrator file to get that. Okay, so it's always good to know the options and know why one thing is there or not. So if you placed it, make sure you send me the Illustrator file and your image. If you copied and pasted it, then make sure that you just send me the Illustrator file. Okay, cool. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to use the one that I originally had. There we go. And we're going to have two copies of this. I'm going to just hide the links there. I'm going to have one here, and then I'm just going to hold down Alt and just drag it off screen. Okay. I like to have one that I work on, like I'm drawing on top of this one, and then one off screen just so I can kind of compare as I'm working. Make it the size that you think the end product will be. Again, we can resize it, so it's not a huge deal. But you don't want to work like that tiny because that's just ridiculous. Okay, and also make sure as you're scaling it, you're holding down Shift. If you don't, it'll do that, and then it looks ugly. Okay. And obviously don't rotate it unless it needs it. Whatever. Okay. So there's my pepper. All right, so what is GradientMesh? Let's go over that. So I'm just going to go off to my workspace here. And let's make a rectangle. And I'm going to go fill this color with a gradient. Okay, so we're familiar with a gradient. It starts off with one color and it goes to the other color. And if we go to our gradient here, there it is. We can take this and we can manipulate where these colors are. We can click and add new colors. Okay. We could even change the direction of this. Right, like we've done before. We can change the shape of it, so it's radial now, or it's linear. This angle right now isn't really going to do anything until I start tweaking stuff, and then it should start modifying that. There we go. Okay. And then you can reverse the gradient too. All right, so there's also these little things on top where you can kind of push the colors over to one side if you need to, but whatever. So there's some manipulation here going on in this gradient, but there's not as much as we would need for something as complex as this. I mean, if you look at this item here, there's like brighter reds, there's darker reds, there's medium tone reds, there's highlights of reds here, here, there. A lot of different stuff is going on in this, and there's no way for a gradient simply to do what we need it to do. All right, so I'm just going to drag a new rectangle underneath it. All right. So now this one I'm just going to give a solid color to. And over here is the gradient mesh. Where'd you go? Oh, right there. Okay, I had to hit the hotkey to see where it was. So this is gradient mesh. And what it's going to allow me to do is click points and assign colors to them. So right now, just for the sake of demonstration, each one of these points is the same exact green. So there's no transition between any of these. If I were to click, let's say, up here at the top, it puts in a new line. And this new line, I could then assign colors to it. So if I just switch to my direct select, I grab these 2 points here, I go to my color swatch, and I give it a different color, you'll see that these 2 points now have a different color. Now, right now it's not any different than a gradient here as far as the look of it. It goes from this green to this grayish green to this green. But here's where it's different. I can take this one point, I'll do this point. I can take any one of those points and change the color of it, and now that one point has a different color. I can click on this point, give it a different color. Okay. I can also move these points. So these points are gradient mesh points, but they're also handlebars that allow me to reshape what this is going to look like. Okay, so this is what's awesome about this, is that we can really kind of customize what we want this exact shape to look like. Now if I click on a bar going across, it's going to put a gradient mesh handle up and down, right? So I go here, it goes there. If I go this way, I go on a bar that's going up and down, it'll go the opposite way. Now notice too that the gradient is kind of flowing with the surface, okay? So it has, even though we don't really see it, it has kind of like these things paired out as to how this thing should flow. And as we add more points to this, it changes how these lines are going to move. So you can see how subtle this move is compared to this one, which is pretty drastic because it's matching up with that shape. And again, every one of these points that we add in here, we can change those colors. Now these are horrible colors, but I just want you to see how we can do that. Okay. Now this obviously seems incredibly complex, but you'll see with the assignment how simple it's going to be. Okay. Now the other thing with the gradient mesh is if I click on a horizontal line or a vertical line, it locks it in just one direction. If I click in the center, it actually adds one in each direction. Okay. And depending on what my last color was that I had clicked, that's the color of that point. So if I were to go in here and let's just say I pick red, okay, then I go over here and click this, it creates a red point right there. Like that point that just got created is red, but then all these other points that got created too are now different colors. So you have to be kind of alert and not go crazy with this, because you know you could very easily add too many points in there and cause yourself a lot of headache. Okay. Now let's see what a circle looks like. So I'll make an ellipse. We'll go to our gradient mesh. It doesn't matter if this was already a gradient. I just click and it automatically assigns it to a solid color. Okay, so there's our circle, and I can again assign a different color to this. Okay, and you can see how simple this is and how we can actually change the contours of this shape simply by manipulating these handles and how the colors are going from one to the other. Okay, and then any one of these points along here, we can change the color to it. We could even hit I to use the eyedropper and click on a point to assign that color to it. So I've assigned the red to that. Now what I'll typically do is hold the control key, and that'll toggle me back to this, wherever my last tool was. And I'll click on a point, I'll let go of the control key, and then use that as an eyedropper. So control to click the point, and then eyedrop. Now this one wasn't an actual point. That one wasn't. So it didn't do anything. And you'll see too, like some of the points just aren't coloring points, and some of them are. This one I'm surprised isn't. Let's make it a blue. No, that's not one. Okay. Alright, so you can see very easily how we can adjust the shape, and then if we needed to, we could add more points. to really kind of customize what we want this shape to look like. Now, the idea with this is flow. We need this to flow like we want the surface to look. So if you just kind of gander at mine, hey, where'd mine go? Oh, if you gander at mine here, you'll see how the surface of these is kind of flowing around that shape. Okay, same thing here. It's flowing around that shape. Like if you were to draw a line going around it, that's what it would be. Okay, same thing here, same thing there. All right. Now, you may say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going to just grab the pen tool, and I'm just going to draw the shape of the pepper. Pretend that this is the shape of the pepper. And then I'm going to go to my gradient mesh, and I'm going to fill it in. Now, watch what happens here. Look how this line doesn't kind of fit the contour of this. It actually just cuts right through. And as I start to manipulate this handlebar, it actually does some wonky stuff. Wonky is a real word, I think. If kafefe is a word, then that's probably is too. Okay, so this is if you ever seen Saving Private Ryan, foobar. Okay, so we can't fix this at all. This is like incredibly messed up. All right, so there's a certain way that we have to do this, a certain way we have to attack this problem, and the way we attack it is by using basic shapes and then tweaking their shape. Okay, so let's set this up and then get going. Layers. I'm going to call this one here reference. And I'm going to lock it. Okay, I don't want to ruin this one. I don't want to move it or anything. It will happen. Make a new layer. Call this pepper. Pepper pots. And we'll save this. Sarcona. Gradient pepper. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. And I'm going to start off with this biggest shape here. Okay. Now, I'm not going to be able to do, just so you can see it here with my brush. I'm not going to want to get this in here too. I should have picked a better color. That's a horrible color, blue. There we go. This here too. What I'm going to do is isolate it into pieces. So this will essentially be one piece. Right? Like that. Okay? And then this will be another piece. Now imagine that those are not wonky. I'm drawing with my mouse. Okay, and then this will be another piece. And then this will be a piece. And then this will be a piece. And then you guessed it, this wonky line here will be another piece. Okay? And then even for the stem, the stem here, the main stem part will be a piece. And then this base part will be another piece. Okay? Delete that. So I'm going to go with my rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a box. And before I get any further than this, I need to go to my gradient mesh. So I hit U. And I need to start adding some stuff in here. So I'm going to just add a line here and a line in the middle. Okay. Now what this does is just kind of establish the direction for each one of these things. Okay. So I know that as I go and move these, I don't want to pull that way down. That's not what I want. Okay. So now I'm just going to kind of move this point here. So I'm following the contour of this. And I'm going to pull this one about here. About there. And you'll see that we automatically get handles. So I'm going to grab the handlebars and try to create a nice smooth transition right down the center of that. Okay. Now, what helps in here is not looking at the shaded mode. So if we control click on this eye, what it does is it puts it in this outline mode so we can just see the lines, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now I can move this about here. A fun fact too, let me just show this real quick. If I control spacebar, okay, click and drag, this is like a interactive zoom. That's what that's called, I think. If I control click on this, that interactive zoom is now gone, and it's a marquee zoom. So just be aware of that does change. And that just might be my computer being stupid, but if it's not, then you'll know why. Okay? So I'm just going to squeeze this point in here. Come in. There we go. My neighbors must be having a wild party or something. Whatever. Alright. So, just keep moving these points. And I'm kind of placing these in a rough spot. Eventually I'll come back and kind of tweak them. I'm looking at this here, okay? So this area right here, I'm kind of following where that should end up. It looks like it's going to come down to about here and then dip down to about there, okay? That's where this point should be, is about there. Okay, and then this is going to follow this contour. And then this one will be inside here. This one will be, let's say, about there. You can see how I'm just clicking on the points here and then just manipulating those handles. Okay. Now you want to do one shape at a time. Don't try to do all of these in one shape, like all this entire thing. It's not going to be a happy camper. Okay. Follow this, and you can tweak it after. You just want to, get your rough placement. All right. So now we have this roughly placed. This looks like it's kind of blocky still, so I just want to kind of smooth that out. Yeah. Okay. Even if it goes past it, that's no big deal. Okay. That's the cool thing about redrawing this, is that we do have some liberties where we can manipulate the shape. There we go. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to take this piece. It's actually in a good spot. I just need to rotate this some. You want to make sure that all your handles are nicely lined up before you move on to the next part of it. Because if your handle is just kind of like wonky like this, then the next handle is going to also be wonky, and so on. Alright, so that's good there. So I'm going to hit U, and then I'm going to add in another line right here. Now if you look at this shape right here, there's actually like this shadow, or this highlight reflection line. Okay, so that's what I'm going to try to grab. I'm going to click here, and you'll see that it goes up there, and that's perfectly fine for that one to go up there, because it eventually will come up there. But I'm going to kind of add some other points in here, like along the side, and let's say down here, and then I can start to manipulate these. Okay, so moving the handlebars. There we go. And like I said, make sure these handlebars are nice and smooth before you move on to the next step. Let's see. Actually, this point's going to come here. And it's going to go down like that. And then this point actually would be down here like this. But that would still be up. Nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. Okay. Also make sure that these points, yes, like comes up and then goes down. That's kind of like weird. So I want to make sure it's nice and flowy. Okay. Let's pull this one up here. Smooth out the handles. And you can use your pen tool to, oops, wrong pen tool, to break the handlebars. Okay, so you can do that too. Alright, it's good. Let's hit U again. And let's start coloring this just so you can see what it's going to look like. So I'm going to control click back on this. And I'm just going to color this red. Okay, so I'm just hit my eyedropper. I use the regular selection tool to grab the whole thing. I'm just going to pick on red. Okay. So now what I want to do is grab the actual colors that are underneath this. Okay, so basically I want to use my direct select and click this point, and then color it the exact color of the pepper underneath it. So to do that, I control click this. Now this is kind of going blind into this, but it's a cool way to do it. So I click on this point, I hit I, and I click. Now what that did, if I click off, is it colored it that exact color. Okay, so I'm going to control click that again, control click the next point, use my eyedropper, control click this point, use my eyedropper, control click that point, use the eyedropper, control click this point, and I'm just grabbing the pepper area that's closest to it right underneath it. Okay, and I'm just going to each area and doing that. Now this is not going to look good at all. It's a step, but it's not going to look what it needs to look like. You saw what mine looked like where I had a bunch of points on there. That's what yours is eventually going to have to look like. The more detail you want to encapsulate, the more points you're going to need to have. Okay, and these points should actually probably be down further too, just because of the shape of that. Okay, so I'm not grabbing the white, which is kind of close to that. I'm kind of making sure I go inward and grabbing some of that like pink. And if you don't like the color that it chose, like here, I could always come in a little bit further and maybe grab a different color and find one that I do like a little bit better. Usually I leave that to the end. Okay, so now I click off, or I control click it, and this is what I have. So that's nowhere near what the pepper is supposed to look like, but if I just turn off my reference layer, you can see how we're getting the shading that we would need to continue on with this. And it also gives you a good indicator as to where some rough spots are, okay? So up here, I definitely see that this is kind of like a wonky shape, so I want to make sure that I verify that's what I want it to look like, and I probably don't. I probably want this to be a little bit smoother. Even if it doesn't look exactly like the shape underneath, I want that to be a bit smoother, okay? Let's control click that again. Turn this off. All right, that was good. Now here it looks kind of wonky, but that's where it's going to blend into the next shape, so I'm going to leave that. Okay. So that's what we're going to be doing for this. Now in order to get the rest of the shape, we just have to keep adding, oops, control click that one. We just have to keep adding more points to this, okay? Now to get this highlight to read, we have to have a point basically in the center of this. So this area here is going to be kind of like bulbous also, like this is kind of bulbousy. So I'm going to add a point, let's say here at the bottom where this is not existing, okay, where this highlight is not right there. And I'm going to add another point up here where the highlight is, it is not. Okay, so I'm basically like blocking in where the highlight is. And then just so you can see, if we control click, again, we're getting these crazy colors. So once you've done the first shape, you really get an idea of where points need to be, or maybe after you've done two shapes, you get where the points need to be. And you actually, I'll go through and add all the points that I need to, or most of them at least, and then go through and color them out. That's what I typically do. All right, so I'm going to add another point right here in the center, and then I'm going to add a couple more points like here and like there, okay, and also one about there. All right, so this should give me a good amount of resolution in this area where I could then kind of isolate these highlights and the reds, okay, because in order for this to work, I have to have like this area be white and then this area be red, because it's going to gradate between those two things. Okay, so that's why we need so many points in this section. Yeah, that's good. All right, and then let's hit U again. And the same thing kind of here. I'm going to add a line on this side, add a line on this side, add a line on that side, and you'll see how these are going to kind of overlap, obviously, each other. And then one right in the center. Okay. And I just added one here just to kind of help fill this area in. All right. Now this here, let's just turn that off for a second. Where this transition happens, we have to have two lines pretty close to each other. One has to be like a red, and one has to be like this lighter red. Okay. So we have one line here, which is kind of outlining where the transition is going to happen, where the white would happen. Go nice and smooth. So I need another line just right on top of it. Okay, just like that. I could tweak this over here, move it, whatever. Initially, it's fine right where it is. I also want to make sure that my lines aren't doing anything crazy down here. I am going to kind of put in some lines here. So I'm looking at shading at this point. Okay, I'm kind of following the shading lines of this. which definitely are helped by the shape of the actual object. So right here is a nice line. This could probably come up some here, and then that gets tweaked. If you don't like the red lines in here, remember we can double click this and we can change the color. So maybe like green might help kind of see this a little bit better. There we go. You can see I'm just trying to get these to flow nicely from one to the other. If they don't flow nicely from one to the other, then we'll get some kind of warbly kind of shapes in there. All right. I also see kind of like a dark shape right here, so I'm just going to add maybe a line here. It doesn't, again, have to be exactly the same shape as this, you know, but we do want to have enough detail in there where it does look decent, so maybe something like that. Okay, in some of these areas where the color is just kind of like gradually changing, I'll have a big gap. Where there's more like surface detail, I'll have more closer lines. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eyedropper and do this again. So I go to this point. This is kind of like the, let's turn on YouTube or turn on some music and just let our brains work. Let me just go through these. And it won't actually like eyedrop on the green bar, just so in case you're worried about that. And now you were losing some sleep on it. It'll only do the item underneath. Now, instead of going side to side, you could just do like these, and then come down to this, whichever way you want to do this. Okay, and if you forget one, it's not a big deal. It'll be pretty obvious when you go back to the colored version that you forgot to do it. And then once things are colored too, then you can also tweak the shape even further to really help kind of sell the look of this. And I can tell that I missed these because if you look at the color here, and then when I eyedrop it, it totally changes. Okay, not that I missed, I just didn't do those yet. And you can grab multiple ones too and do assign the same color to multiple points. So if I were to click on, let's say 12 points, and then eyedrop something, it'll assign that same color to all 12 of those points. Not a huge benefit in this case, but in some cases it definitely is. So once I get done with this area here, okay, that's the top area, let's control click, click off, and then we can see what this is looking like. Okay, so it looks like I missed a whole row, and I did. So let's see which row that was again, that row there. Okay, let's go here, eyedrop. Like I said, it's obvious that you missed something, or I missed something. And some of these I'm going to go maybe a little bit more red than the actual color that's there, just because I want to have a little bit more contrast in that area. But again, most of that time I'll do that at the end, like at the very end, I'll tweak my colors. There we go. All right. So now if we look at the before and after, you can see the colors are much closer. Okay, now I'm not liking how maybe, I don't know, washed out it's looking. So maybe I'll grab some of these points here. And maybe go to more of a darker red. So I'm just kind of grabbing something more in the middle here. There we go. Right, so now we can look at, this is why I like to have this one, I can look at the top of this, look at the top of that, and then estimate, what it's looking like and seeing if I'm liking the way that it's coming out. So far it's looking okay. Once we get more of this in here, obviously it'll look a lot better. This black down here obviously isn't working. Okay, so we would just do the same process, go through each one of these points and just eyedrop each one of those. If we need to tweak anything, like maybe we need to tweak some of the shapes, we can do that too. Like this point here, it may benefit if we were to kind of squeeze some of these together and then using our pen tool, maybe just kind of broke some of these handles just to create more of that rounding. Right, pull these points in, Alt, drag to break the handlebars. Oops. And what this does is it just changes how it's interpolating from the square shapes to the round ones. So usually what happens is you'll end up with something that looks maybe a little bit too squarish, and this will help just kind of round it off. Okay, so now it looks a little bit more rounded. Okay. All right, so you'll do that for this entire shape. If you need more detail, add more detail. In some areas, you'll see, if I look at the very top of this, we have this nice little highlight line going across. On mine, over here, we have it, but it's more of like a blurry highlight line. So that's where I can come in and say, okay, well, I definitely need to add another line here. So before I do, I'm just going to eyedrop maybe, let's say, darker red here. Okay, that way when I come into this and I click, that darker red color is right there. So now I know that, okay, these colors should be pretty fine. And then these back colors there, I can just eyedrop and add in a little bit of highlight. Okay, and I'm not eyedropping from below, I'm just eyedropping from the color that I have. And you'll see that now I get this nice little rim light on top of that. Okay, now that'll be the same for any of these other spots here. This one's a little bit more fuzzy. This is a bit darker, so I'd have more crisper lines there. There's another line here. Definitely around here you see it. Okay, so that'll be continuous. Now, once we have one shape done, then we would do another shape. So what we want to do is give this a name. So we would call this front left. Then we would just go to a square, draw it out, go with our gradient mesh, add in our 2 points, and then just line it up. Now, where this lines up is somewhat critical, okay? Because we're going to be blending these shapes together, we need to look like that we're not actually having 2 shapes there. So what I'm going to do is initially just kind of line it up the way I would if I didn't have the other one there, all right? And again, I'll control click. I don't control click this. That doesn't do it. I have to control click that, okay, the top piece. And if you don't want to see the other piece while you're working on it, just turn it off. Okay, so I'm lining this up. Oops. Right here. Right there. Okay, just like the other one doesn't exist, right? That's what we're doing. This back piece will be a separate piece that we'll add on after, so don't worry about that one. Make sure the point's in the right spot before you start tweaking the handles, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get it in the right spot. This handle here, well, I'll tweak that in a second. Good. And you can see it doesn't match up perfectly, but it's close. And then this, I need to make sure that this flows nicely into this rounding. Okay, like that. All right, now this handle here, I want this to come up this way. Okay, and really capture that kind of shape here. Like that. All right, so now let's turn the other one on. And this is where we have to make sure that these points are overlapping. So this isn't overlapping, so I'm just going to move that point. Now I like to make sure that I just have that one point right there. Okay, so that's good there. And I'm going to get this close to it. It doesn't have to be exact, but it's going to be close. Oops. Go down to this handlebar, shove that in. All right, this one has more points. We'll add more points and then kind of pull that out, so I'm not too concerned about that at the moment. Again, it's just kind of getting it closer to that region so it works. Okay, so now that's pretty close to it. We need some overlap. Okay, so there has to be some overlap. If there's not overlap, we'll actually get a gap between them. We don't want that. All right, that looks good. So now we can go to U, and then I can just start adding some points. I'll add a point here. I'll add a point there. I'm just kind of like this hump right here is what I'm trying to emulate, and then this part here. Okay, so this will come over. You can use your arrow keys also if you need to. Sometimes that's a little bit easier to kind of lock it in. There we go. And then again, make sure we're overlapping. Yep. That's good there. Pull this up some, pull that up some. I'm pulling all these handles up because it looks like they're kind of like slanting down and then coming in, and they're not. They're all kind of going up and over. Okay, and then this one is going to go down like this. Like that. Alright, so you can see the shape of this one is a little bit maybe easier to see because it's a side view or a sider view. Okay, now here's where the magic is going to come in. So you're going to color this one the same way you colored this one. Everything's going to be exactly the same. Okay, as far as that goes. Now the difference is going to be that when you get to this seam right here, it's not going to line up, and it's actually going to look like there is a seam regardless of how you have that set up. I need to turn off pixel snapping. There it is. It's snapping to pixels. I don't want to do that. There we go. Okay. So regardless of how we have this set up, I go here, I hit the eyedropper, I click. I go here, I hit the eyedropper, I click. 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 Oops, this point's not overlapping. No, it is. Okay. Alright, so that should be good enough for the demo. Right, so let's control click that back on. Let me go one more out. I'm just going to color this red just so we can see it. Alright. So now if I control click off of this, you'll see that it definitely looks like there is a seam right there. Okay, and not like a good seam, like there definitely feels like something is dividing them, but they still feel like they're connected, especially like right here and right there. But ours doesn't feel like that. This one feels like there's two separate pieces. So what we do is whichever one is on top, okay, so in this case the front left will be on top. This one will be front right. I'm going to reselect these colors. So if I go to this color here, hit the I key, and now I'm not going to do the control click to hide it, and I'm just going to pick whatever color is, oops, and pick that item. Try this again. Make sure I'm in direct select. There we go. And now I'm just going to pick whatever color is right there next to it. And what this does is it helps sample, oops, that same color so that the colors will blend together. Now it may take some adjustment, you know, because there is a gradation here, so it may just be a little bit over, a little bit whatever. Alright, so just that little area that I just did up here, now you can see that that feels like it's actually connected a bit better. Okay, it feels like those colors are a little bit closer together than what they were. If not, again, we can click on it and try to grab a different section of it and see if we can get those to blend a little bit nicer together. Okay, so, and then especially from out here, it'll look a lot better. So that's what you're going to do for all of these different shapes. So you're just going to draw this one, and then you'll draw that one, make sure they're blended in. Make sure down here they nicely line up together. And again, just so you can see that way that these blend together. And you may need to add extra points too, like sometimes you need to add just an extra division going across, maybe this way or the other way. There you go. So now you can see definitely right there, that's a much nicer blend than it was before. Okay, so then you'll do all these pieces here, and then you'll do the stem, and then you'll do that. Now let's jump back to this one so you can see what the end product is. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my reference so we don't see that. So here's the amount of lines I have on this one. Here's the amount of lines I have on that one, this one, that one. You'll see this one here, there's actually quite a bit of overlap. Okay, if we look at front right, you'll see where front right is, right here, and where that one is. You can see that this line actually intersects it a whole lot, where this line is more on the edge. Okay, so you can actually overlap it quite a bit. It's just a matter of making sure that when you do those lines that they match up and blend nicely. Okay, there's that one, here's this one, there's that one. Okay, once you get to the back ones, they really don't need a whole lot of points to them. It's just these front two that have a lot of points to them. Okay, now the more detail you want in something, the more points you need. So in here, let me turn off this for a second and turn the reference on. There's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of bumps and scratches and colorations that are making this part of the shape. So in order to get that, you need more lines. So I don't have as many lines as I would to get exactly that, but this works, especially when we're zoomed out. You can definitely see that that area works. Now I did this one as as one square rectangle, and then this one was another rectangle, and it's just layer stacked to make sure that they're nice and lined up. Okay, so by the time you're done, you should have something that looks pretty similar to this. Now, something that I noticed on my computer is if I'm on this view GPU preview, I get these like scratches in there. It's hard to see maybe on the screen, but it looks like there's like holes in my GradientMesh. And I don't know why it's doing that, but if I switch this to preview on CPU, it doesn't do that. Okay, so just be aware of that, that sometimes the computer itself can kind of play games with you. All right. And then what I did is I added this extra little background piece. Just to give it something to make it pop out a little bit more. Okay, on here it's kind of boring, so that makes it look a little bit more exciting. You can see these ones are just paths that I assigned just this stroke to, and then I just rotated it around just like we've done before on the previous assignments. This is a stroke here, this is a stroke there, this is a fill, and then this here is just a shape. I just used a shape, cut it out along that path, and then I just made it the darker version of that blue. Okay, now these types of things are all over. If you look at vector icons, they do not those ones specifically, like there we go, like these here. There's a lot of these that have these like little shadows on them. Okay, and they're kind of like a neat way to give it some more depth to it, as opposed to just like a regular drop shadow, or you know, just an outline. Okay, and I also have, just so you can see it, here's the pepper outlined, just so you can see what a gradient mesh would look like if I tried to do it all in one shape. There's that one, there's that one. So you can see that these are not really flowing as nicely as we would want them to, especially when we get to some of these edges where we really need this to, you know, hit it a certain way. It's just no bueno. Okay. So when you're done, you should have 3 main layers: a pepper layer, which has all of your stuff laid out, You should have a background layer, which has all your background pieces. You don't need to label each one of these in the background, because it's just like background pieces. And then you should have your reference layer, so I can see which pepper you were trying to emulate. Now again, this pepper does not look exactly like this one. This one has a lot more bumps and deformations in it. I could get that by adding more detail, but that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. Try to keep your lines as little as possible while maintaining as much detail. You can see how low the detail is on mine. This one has a bit more than that one, obviously. But these back here don't have a whole lot. The stem obviously does. If you get into doing gradient mesh, there's a lot of other stuff you can do. Like this portrait here is a gradient mesh portrait, and if you look at the stuff that people have done with it, it's like amazing how photorealistic you can get with that. This is a gradient mesh, and you can see, sure, open a new tab. You can see all the different lines and patches that have gone into creating this Jack Nicholson drawing right here. This is that guy's thing. And he goes into exactly what we just talked about, how the gradient mesh works. Let's see, there's a whole bunch of these out here that people have done. It's just like amazing stuff. Okay, and it's all the same process. It's doing exactly what we've done before. And then, like I said before too, like if you don't like the color of something, you can always grab, like, let's say I don't like how dark this area is. I can click this, hit the eyedropper, and then just grab another area until I find something that I do like. Okay, I don't like that, but just to show you. Okay, on some of these I've actually brightened the highlights a bit just because they were kind of dark from when I sampled them. But pay attention to those things. Pay attention to where these highlights are coming in here, where the highlights are there. These are actually maybe a little bit too bright, so I can just eyedrop this. That's what's cool about having a gradient right there, is that you can just kind of sample that gradient and get the color that you want. There we go. Yep, see, maybe that's a little bit too bright. So just grab, oops. That, and now we just kind of soften that some. Cool. Alright, so make sure you labeled it your name. Make sure you put it into the correct Dropbox folder. And then that'll be this assignment. It's pretty straightforward. The hardest thing is just kind of getting out where these lines are going to be. So if you need to, you know, you can kind of use my video as a reference for where I've put lines and maybe help you get started on where those lines should be. You'll see too that I've kind of put them in different spots. This one compared to this one. Let me just copy. I'll just copy the one I believe worked out. So you can see these two things here, I've kind of done them a different way. So in this one I had it kind of come up and then like this, and this one I went down. It's no big deal either way, it's just a matter of how I decided to work this time compared to last time. Okay, cool. And then always turn this off. You know, you want to look at it and see what it looks like without all that junk. And you can see that again. Zoom out. You can see the little slashes that are in there, little holes. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so cool. Easy peasy, cup of cheesy.